So let's begin with a little motivation, rather. Try to calm your mind by watching your breathing, first of all. Being mindful, the mental factor, mindfulness of your respiration. As you start to focus in on the breathing, you can recognize that still your mind is paying attention to your eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and so forth. Try to withdraw your attention away from them and place it just on the respiration. Then bring your attention to your mental consciousness and try to apprehend that which we've becoming familiar with, the conventional Buddha nature, the clear light nature of the mind. Let go of your body, your perception of the body. Let go of the other thoughts, worries. Even let go of the sense of the I, the self, the observer. And within this clarity of mind, I think that in order to benefit living beings, I have to first learn how not to harm them, to go beyond that, to be less needy myself, to have less attachment, which prevents me from having the space and time to be able to help sentient beings. And then to develop the good qualities of mind, body, and speech. That accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom. That bring about my own goal, total peaceful, blissful, everlasting happiness of Dharmakaya. And the goal of others, the emanation of the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya, the enlightened activity, especially the activity of speech, teaching the Dharma, turning the wheel of Dharma, leading sentient beings. So for that purpose, I have to hear the Dharma that Lord Buddha taught, to think about it, to contemplate, understand what his intention was, the intricacies of his thought. And then to familiarize with that, what we call meditation. So for that purpose, in order to get familiar especially with the mind, the mental factors, especially wisdom that overcomes ignorance, the fundamental primary mind of bodhicitta accompanied by the two aspirations, and so forth. I'm going to, this evening and during this course of study, listen to, study, try to meditate on the subject of mind and mental factors for the purpose of achieving that goal of enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. Relax your attention back. I think the compressor went off just in time, so it interrupted our meditation, but it didn't interrupt the discourse. You heard the compressor for the Coca-Cola machine or whatever that is outside. I'm not sure why we have that outside.
They put it there just for you.
They put it there for me. It's an offering. How's everyone? Yeah, good. Hi. You haven't been here before, have you?
I've been here last year.
Oh.
For the first time a year ago.
Okay. What's your name?
Dan.
Dan. Hi, Dan. And you've been here, right? No.
This is my second.
Okay. Are they your parents or friends? Or your dad? Okay, cool. Everyone else, I think everyone knows. What's your name?
Miles.
Miles. And Lori and Dan. So everyone else, I won't introduce everyone else, but just so they know who you are. So we're studying the text Mind and Mental Factors, written by the great text writer of Serije Monastery, Jason Trukhi Gelsen. Written by Yeshe Gelsen, who was I believe the Rinpoche, the Lama of Sechenling Monastery in Tibet. And we got last time just up to the section on mental factors, I believe, page 16. So if you have a text, maybe you can pay attention. So basically what we've done, first of all, the way that Geshe Gelsen set out the text, first he had the sort of preliminary verses, as is often found, the prostration to and taking refuge in the the venerable holy lamas who are inseparable with Manju Gosha Nath, so that kind of implied Lama Tsongkhapa, as his Gelugpa text especially, as is one of his I'm going to say nicknames, you say? Epithets of Lama Tsongkhapa is Gompo Jambeyang, or Jamgon. Actually, it means the protector Manjushri, but often in these texts, in these contexts, it means refers to Lama Tsongkhapa, who is believed to be an emanation of Manjushri. So, Geshe Gelsen set out some verses of praising the various lamas of the past, the lineage lamas, the 6 ornaments, and the 2 trailblazers. And also he promised, made a sort of a motivation to complete this text, to write about it. And then he began to talk about the motivating factors. He quoted Nagarjuna and Aryadeva and Shantideva and other texts about the importance of knowing about the mind. As I mentioned before, my own experience, Lama Zopa Rinpoche saying, it's all in the mind. The body's important. We take, a lot of people are very concerned about the food they eat nowadays, isn't it? They're very, almost religious about, I remember some of the monks at one time, one of my roommates was eating macrobiotic. Is that how you say it? Not microbiotic, macrobiotic. And he wouldn't touch anything else, but then he kind of binged afterwards and when he went off that diet. And I think all of the physical benefits were gone. Buddhism doesn't put so much stress on you are what you eat sort of thing. That some people, very much that. But especially in the higher reaches of Buddhism, it's more just your mind is much more fundamentally important. It determines what's going to happen in the future. What you do to your body this lifetime, the food you take, is more or less limited. Its consequences are more or less limited to this lifetime, whether the food has some little defilement in it or not. Of course, you want to eat in such a way that your life will be long so you can practice Dharma, but it's all in the mind. And then we talked a bit about the various definitions of primary mind, what primary mind meant, as opposed to mental factors. Can someone, maybe Diane, could you give a synopsis for Dan? What's the difference between Sem and Semjong, mind and mental factors?
So the main mind is seeing...
Which means mind, right?
Mind.
Yeah, main mind, or fundamentally...
Like the main entity of an object, whereas the mental factors are observing features or attributes of an object.
Right, and they're kind of... They're actually one entity, like an ocean and the waves, the various mental factors. Mental factors, the study of these very, very popular, you might say, in the Theravada tradition in Thailand, and some of the academics, the Abhidharmists. Like in the Theravada tradition, they had various streams. The forest monks that might be more meditators, and then the city dwellers that often, not always, but often were the Abhidharmists. They were kind of like studying the Abhidharma, and they would learn all of these various divisions, of which the mental factors, minds and mental factors, were important. We also had another main definition of mind and mental factors, the difference between them that was more suitable for debate, that was more logical, that said that a main mind is that which bears 5 similarities with its attendant mental factors, right? its retinue of mental factors, and the mental factors were that which bore 5 similarities with their primary mind. And then we talked about what these 5 similarities were in the various lower Abhidharma, upper Abhidharma. I just wanted to mention one thing about that. Those of you who are studying tenets in the text that we're using, one of the texts, the subsidiary text, it mentions in the section on the Vaibhashikas, it says, well, I'm on the right page here. Only the proponents of the great exposition, who are they? The Vaibhashikas, right? Only the Vaibhashikas say that a mind and its mental factors are different substantial entities. The other schools assert that they are the same entity. So I may have not made that clear before. I might have made a mistake, or I may have not made that clear before. The Vaibhashika, although when we talk about the 5 similarities, like on page 12, we talk about similar substance. This is coming from the Vaibhashika system, right? This first set of 5 similarities. But it doesn't mean that they are one substantial entity, the mind and mental factors, like the ocean and the waves. From Vaibhashika, they're the only ones who say that it's almost as though the mental factors have a different entity. They're not of the same entity of the primary mind. So the meaning of similar substance is different. It's that they're just like the substance of primary mind has only one primary mind for each consciousness. Also, the mental factors of each kind of mental factors within its retinue, there's only one substance of each. That's what the similarity of substance. Doesn't mean they are the same substance or one and the same substance. And then there were some questions about what is mental primary consciousness, what is body primary consciousness, and so forth. And some talk about the Chittamatra system. So we're up to page 16. And if you, those of you who get a chance to have this text, if you're going to look in Tibetan, this section 1b on page 16 is on the 7th page, the front of the 7th page, on one line from the bottom. So we don't have that yet. Some of you don't have that yet, but in case you want to look later when someone prints out. So here it says, the explanation of the mental factors. So we just had the explanation of primary consciousness. Now, regarding the entity of mental factors, which here entity kind of means definition, okay? What their nature is, regarding the nature of mental factors. It is, as has been said in a text called Discussion of the 5 Aggregates, which was written by Vasubandhu. A question arises. Also, what are the phenomena that are mental factors? What are the mental factors phenomena? And so this is Semle Jungwa, the mental factors. And the answer is, they are phenomena, where she's translated, they are phenomena concomitant with the mind, or I would say, the answer is, whatever phenomena have similarities with the mind. This is what she says, concomitance is what she was previously translating as similarities. Sungbar Demba Nam, those that bear similarities with the primary mind are the phenomena of mental factors. So that's just starts out. Now, what are these mental factors? If we divide them up, there are how many? 52, right? Okay, I'll just try to trick you. 51 mental factors. And Steve? So I got it finally. Do you know the divisions? You understand? Okay. So there are, Lisa, there are 5 what?
5 different categories.
Oh, okay. So there are 5 omnipresent mental factors.
Object.
Ascertaining. Yeah. Those are also 5.
And then there's the wholesome ones and the unwholesome ones.
Right, so there's 11 virtuous.
Virtuous or wholesome.
Does she translate wholesome here?
No.
Virtuous, yeah. I guess you could say wholesome. Yeah, it depends on how you. Kewa, yeah. And then there's 11 of those, but there are more negative ones. There are more kleshas. There are, how many kleshas are there? Root kleshas.
Root ones and then secondary
Good.
root ones. A whole long list of the secondary ones.
Yeah. How many root ones?
They go on and on.
Oh, they go on forever. How many root ones are there?
11? No.
Six root klesha, and 20. It's not so long.
That's not too bad.
That's not so bad. But that's more than 5 because we've got one more category. There's a 6th category which are called changeable, 4 changeable. So we've got 5 omnipresent, 5 object ascertaining, that's 10, 11 virtuous minds, it's 21, 6 root delusions, 27, 20 secondary delusions, is that 47, and then 4 more changeable mental factors make 51. So that's good to know as sort of an outline. And here, she always says, just as it has been said, it just as is said in the discussion of the 5 aggregates, 5 are omnipresent, 5 ascertain objects individually, individually ascertain objects. 11 are virtuous, are virtues, 6 are afflictions, that means delusions or klesha. Others are secondary afflictions, 4 are changeable. Okay, so now we begin with the first one. The in Tibetan we say kundro nga. Kundro, kun means all, or kuntu sometimes means always. Like in Tibetan, the name for Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra? What does Samantabhadra mean?
Always good.
Always excellent, always fantastic. Samanta kuntu sangbo, we say, or kunsang. Sometimes, Tibetans name kunsang. That's short for kuntu sangbo. Kuntu means always. So here, kuntu drowa means always going. It's kind of like busy California life, New York life, right? Kuntu drowa means these are always functioning. So they've often translated as omnipresent, or maybe omni-going, I don't know. So these 5 mental factors are going to be present in any kind of consciousness which is at least able to, it's kind of like awake. There's some exceptions, like at the time of just awaking from sleep or going to sleep, or at the time of death, at the time of birth. They may be arising or disappearing, some of them. But in general, all consciousnesses have these, whereas not all consciousnesses have any of the other mental factors necessarily. Okay. So the first one in the usual listing like this is feeling, tsorwa. And those of you who are doing the Tibetan class see how Siki is transliterating sorwa here. It says TSH, right? So that's the second tsa, tsorwa. Tsorwa in Sanskrit is Vedana. Vedana means feeling, what we translate as feeling, but maybe you could translate as sensation, because here it doesn't mean like, I have really strong feelings, I want to talk to you, It means, what do we mean by that when we say, I have feelings? It means kind of emotions, right? So this doesn't mean that kind of meaning of feelings. It refers to a particular kind of sensations that we always experience. One of the most fundamental things in our continuums is the feelings of pleasure or displeasure. We say suffering, or neutral feelings. Though you might not recognize neutral feelings, because as is said a little bit further on, pleasant feelings or pleasurable feelings are that once they've arisen, you want to, or once they've disappeared, you want to get them again. That's how you can kind of recognize a pleasant feeling. Unpleasant feelings are those that when they've arisen, you want to get rid of them. the experience and their experiences. Okay, they're actually the experience of the mind, how the mind experiences the ripening of our past karma. Neutral feelings are those which, when they arise or they disappear, you neither, you're just gonna, so what, you don't have any particular feeling of wanting to separate from them or to get them again. Maybe if you were in extreme suffering, you might sort of even look after, you might be even eager to have neutral feelings, right? Even to be neutral might be desirable in that case, having been a lot of suffering. So let's see what the text says here. So he's going to quote the compendium of knowledge. What is the compendium of knowledge? The entity of feeling is just as has been taught in the compendium of knowledge. What's that? Samuchaya, right? Compendium here means, samuchaya in Sanskrit. Abhidharma, she's translating it as knowledge. Mumba kundu. Actually, maybe you remember when Vola was translating for Rinpoche during the King of Prayers, sometimes when she was talking about the Abhidharma Pitaka, she just said the Abhi Pitaka. I don't know if anyone picked that up. Do you remember that? Do you remember? Okay. Because actually it's ngumba. It's not knowledge. Ngumba means higher or Abhi. So sometimes Rinpoche we say ngumpa kundu is short for the name of this text. It's actually Abhidharma Samuchaya. Abhidharma ngumpe che, Abhidharma, higher dharma. So this is the higher Abhidharma written by a Sangha. So in there he says, what's the defining characteristic of feeling? It has the characteristic of experience, the defining characteristic of experience. That's what, and here, that's what sensation is, or that's what feeling is. Through the entity of experience, it experiences individually the fruitional or maturational results of virtuous and non-virtuous actions. It's whose entity of experience experiences individually the ripening results of virtuous and non-virtuous actions. So what does that mean? We have to know a little bit about karma to understand what that means. When we create actions of body, speech, and mind, they leave what the Buddha calls seeds, kind of imprints within our continua associated with us, that at some time in the future, those, like seeds in the real world, they begin to germinate, and when the right conditions come, they can give a result. They're slowly maturing, and when they're totally matured, when they're ready and they meet all of the external conditions, they can bring about their result. Karma ripens in many different ways, though, right? Do you know the 4 kinds of ways in which karma ripens? The 4 results of karma? Who knows? I bet Chris knows. Do you know?
I only know that 3 is after this slide, the next slide, and left side. Yeah.
Okay, that's one kind of division. But here I'm thinking they're called, the maturation result is that kind of full result of karma that throws you into another rebirth. That's not what's meant by maturation or fruitional here, although one might get that impression. The maturation result of karma, when you've done a path of action, like killing or stealing, or a virtuous path of action like giving or protecting life, you create, if you do it completely with all the various limbs, that can throw you into another rebirth, into, let's say, if in the lower realms, if it's ripening, full maturation of negative karma, or in the upper realms, if it's full maturation of positive karma. So it's called the maturational result. And actually, sometimes in the text there are 3. I always like we did this before, didn't we? But sometimes the second one is divided in 2, so then you get 4, right? Do you see this, Miles? So what's the second one? If it's 3, what's the second one? You must know, Georgie. So there's the maturational result. I don't know. That's the third one, maybe. The one that's divided in 2 is called the result similar to the cause, or the effect similar to the cause. So sometimes in the scriptures it says the maturation result, which means rebirth, the result similar to the cause, and the environmental result. So the result similar to the cause is 2 kinds. The result similar to the cause as what? An action, and the result similar to the cause as an experience. So the result similar to the cause as an action means, like, if you've killed before, what's similar to that in terms of activity? Killing again. Habitual, you could call it habitual result. The result similar to the cause as an experience means if you've killed before, you might be killed, or your lifespan will be shortened. Like that. Also, it can affect the medicine you take may not be effective even for you. The environmental result means that it determines what kind of environment you might actually have the karma to experience, whether it be full of thorns and broken pieces of glass on the ground, or if there's war and danger going around, or whether it's pleasant and beautiful and so forth. So we usually say there are 4 results. So here, and one of them is called the maturation result, but that first maturation result is not what's meant by maturation, she's translating fruition here. This is just talking about the ripening. Feeling is the main way that karma, our past karma, ripens on us in feelings. So which one of those results is feeling? Because, no. Probably the result similar to the cause is an experience, right? Because the maturation result, the first result, is I think in the Abhidharma says it's neutral. That means it's not virtuous. You know, being born in the human realm is not itself, birth in the human realm is not virtuous or non-virtuous. It's just an occurrence, right? But virtuous, positive feelings, pleasurable feelings, have to arise from what kind of karma? From the maturation or the ripening of what kind of karma? Virtues. From virtues only. Can only arise from virtue. Suffering can only arise from non-virtue. This is what's meant. Remember in karma, when we talk about karma in the Lanrim, we talk about there are 4 main outlines. You must know. Who knows this? Don, you must know this. Mark, you know the 4 outlines of karma?
Well, let's see.
I think you got it, because I can tell your confidence. Okay.
Okay. Karma is definite.
Right.
But it grows. I thought that, I wasn't sure.
I never played those games. I
Charades.
remember once charades. Yeah, but I just thought you might get that one.
I
Karma's
played
definite.
a lot of charades.
It grows or increases. And who can help me? Let's finish up with.
You won't experience any karma you didn't
Yeah. Karma's never lost, and there's no. It's impossible to experience a result without having created the cause. Right. So those are the 4 outlines. So karma is definite. Sometimes people, what does karma is definite mean? Venerable, Sophia. Karma is definite. What does that mean, definite?
It's a virtuous one, then you got the cause and the result of corresponding.
Right, exactly. There's a definite relationship between the cause and result. Sometimes people think karma is definite means if you create karma, you'll definitely have a result. That's not the meaning of karma is definite, right? Karma is definite means virtuous karma definitely gives pleasurable results. Negative karma, which is only defined as negative because it gives suffering result, And there are neutral kinds of actions that give rise to neutral feelings. Like sweeping the floor with no particular motivation might be a neutral action. So these are the main ways. It's very important to know about feeling, because feeling is what impels us. Not only is it the main way that our karma ripens on us, is very, very apparent. When you're depressed, for instance, when things are going wrong, when you're suffering, that's very apparent to you, isn't it? It's like very burdensome. And I say, that sounds too academic. It's a drag, something worse than that. It's lousy. When you're suffering, right? When your baby leaves you, what kind of suffering would that be? Of the different kinds of suffering from the Lanrim? Loss. So that if those of you who have a chance to study the Lanrim, when Lord Buddha talked about the various kinds of suffering, this would be separating from that which is desired, So your baby leaves you, or you lose your job, or your money disappears, or whatever. All of this is the result of your past actions. And as Don was mentioning also before, there's no way that you can experience one of these results, whether it be the four results, maturation in the human realm or something, or the feelings. There's no way you can experience this without having created the cause. So you can always put the blame as a Chinese. Is there anyone Chinese? Sophia, in China you go like this, me? Or is it the Japanese that say me? The Chinese say me? They point to the noise, yeah? In America, what do we say? Me. Where do you point? Here, right? Because of like heart chakra, maybe this is kind of interesting. Here we don't say me. We don't go like here, do we? Even though people think they associate with the brain with their being. So there's any kind of suffering you experience, suffering feeling is going to have come about because of the karma you've created in the past. So the text continues. Here, that which is experienced by feeling is taught to be a maturation, a fruition. It is the ripening of the karma that we've created in the past. Literally it says, that which is experienced, the object of experience of feeling. Literally it says, Sorwe Nyongja, with regard to the, because in Tibetan we have this kind of construction. Nyongja means that which is to be experienced, and Nyongje means that which experiences, that which causes, sort of like subject and object. So that which is the experience of feeling is a maturation, a ripening. This is taught for the purpose of knowing that all feelings that arise within us, whether pleasant or suffering, for the purpose of knowing that all feelings are solely the result of maturation of actions, the fruitional result of actions. Moreover, the great exposition of the stages of the path, which is the Lanrim Chemo, and you can actually, there are a lot of quotations from Lanrim Chemo, so if you happen to have a copy, this particular quotation is on page 210. So we'll read it here and then we'll just check how they translated it. This is the great text by Lama Tsongkhapa on the stages of the path. Here, Siki translated, the manner in which actions are definite, okay, that's the first of the four outlines, right, is as follows. Regardless of whether we are ordinary beings or superiors, what does that mean? Like better family? So here she's translating Arya beings, so it means usually we can divide all beings into ordinary beings and Arya beings. That's one way of dividing. Is the Buddha not included in that? The Buddha is called, we say the Arya Buddha. The Buddha is also an Arya. Aryas are those who have realized emptiness. Ordinary beings are those who have not realized emptiness, right? So the manner in which actions are definite is as follows. Regardless of whether we are ordinary beings or Aryas, all happiness in the aspect of pleasant feelings, even as slight as that produced in dependence on a cool breeze when one is born in hell, arise This should her all, what is it? All happiness in the aspect of present feelings arise, isn't it? Arises. All happinesses in the aspect, she said, all happiness in the aspect of pleasant feelings. Yeah, in the aspect, but actually the way the Tibetan is, it looks like it's actually a plural. All happinesses in the aspect of pleasant feelings arise from virtuous actions accumulated in the past. Happiness cannot arise from non-virtuous action. This is the statement she has. Actually, this statement in the text, it says, non-virtuous actions, the arisal of pleasure from non-virtuous actions is baseless, or in Tibetan we say neme. She just translates it in the other text, just says cannot arise. This comes when we talk about the 10 uncommon qualities of Buddha. You know, when we talk about in the Mahayana Sutras, one of them is the Buddha knows ne and neme, which ne means what is possible and what is impossible. You could say what has basis and what is not baseless, which has no basis. So it's talking about this very factor. The Buddha knows that from virtuous karma, he knows from his own experience, not just from theory or, having gone to Buddhist catechism or something, that virtue gives rise to happiness and so forth. Also, all suffering in the aspect of painful feelings, even as slight as that produced in the mental continuum of a foe destroyer. What does that mean? George Bush? The American Army? Who are the foe destroyers? Arhats. So this is a translation of Arhats. Tibetan Da Chomba. Foe destroyer. All of those arise from non-virtue accumulated in the past. Suffering cannot arise from virtuous actions, or in other words, the arisal of suffering from virtuous actions is an impossibility, is a neme, is baseless, or is a non-occurrence. Doesn't occur at all, impossible. And I think later it comes up, this thing about can an Arya, here it says an Arhat, even the suffering, a headache in the continuum of a Arya, of an Arhat. Is that possible, Dorje? Can an Arhat have suffering? Haven't they attained nirvana?
Would that be like the stains that you were talking about before? Although the seeds have been, the delusion, the kleshas have been removed, and the seeds of the kleshas have been removed, still the stains. That's talking
about just your subjective mental experiences and what sort of mental factors arise in terms of not the ripening, not so much talking about how feeling arises. Feeling arises from the ripening of karmic seeds, not from the imprints of the delusions. Those seeds are talking about the seeds of the delusions. Arhats have abandoned those, but they've also abandoned true sufferings, haven't they? Arhats. What do you think, Oma? Have Arhats, by definition, they've attained nirvana, right? They've attained true cessation. Yeah. So how can they have? So true cessation means the cessation of suffering and the cause of suffering. How can they have a headache? Right?
Pain and suffering, two different things.
Two different things?
Yeah.
Pain and suffering, two different things. Actually, same word, dukkha. I think it means the same. What's your thought?
Well, I remember. I can't remember the name of the sutra where he was being cut apart by the king. The sutra that was being cut apart, or when the Buddha was being cut apart. Yeah, and he talked about while he was being cut apart, not feeling any hatred or anger toward the person cutting him,
right.
And feeling the pain, but not experiencing suffering.
Feeling the pain. This sounds like a line of rock and roll songs. Feeling the pain.
He's not producing more karma by it, though.
He's not. Well, that's true. He's not creating more karma because his response to it is one of without ego.
Right.
But is it possible for an arhat to experience pain and suffering?
Because he still has contaminated aggregates.
Still has
because
contaminated
but he's still
aggregates.
with remainder of that body
Right.
that's contaminated.
According to the terminology of the lower tenets, but even higher bodhisattvas don't. That's one of the special qualities. It said that the first ground is called the joyous ground. They go from joy to joy. So because of their incredible accumulation of meritorious karma, they experience bliss even when someone cuts them, like the bodhisattva who was practicing patience. It was in the Jataka tales, I think, the life stories of the Buddha talked about that. So yeah, the arhats do experience pain. Even the Buddha, although the Buddha was far beyond that, like culminated the Mahayana path for the sake of disciples who were common. I think I've told you this before. One time when the Buddha manifested being sick, had a fever, the monks were putting cold compress on him, and they asked how he felt. And the Buddha said, "There are waves of pain coursing through my body, but my mind is at ease." So there's a difference between the response, just as Oma was saying, because of the fact of experiencing those feelings without attachment, without any kind of, not only without attachment, without ego grasping, it's just there. It's just like watching something. Oh, there's pain in the body. It's recognized. It's not that they're oblivious of it, but it is something that they will abandon the contaminated aggregates according to their tenets when they achieve nirvana without remainder. So it goes on. He quotes, this is still a quotation from Lam Rinpoche. He quotes the precious garland, what is it? And what is it in Sanskrit? Ratna something. The precious garland. From non-virtue comes all suffering, and likewise all bad migrations. From virtue comes all happy migrations, and the happiness within all rebirths. So when it says bad migrations and happy migrations, that's referring to which result? That's the maturational result. Remember the 4 results. One of them throws you into a rebirth, upper realm or lower realm. So from non-virtue comes all sufferings, and likewise all bad migrations. Because bad migrations are, by definition, they're not suffering. They're not, the migration itself may be experienced as suffering, but just being born in the upper realms is not pleasure itself. Is not the ripening on our feeling aggregate of pleasure, because some people born in the upper realms experience misery all the time. Okay? Therefore, happiness and suffering neither arise without cause, nor arise from incompatible causes or discordant causes, such as the various Vedic schools believe. Fundamental nature, I'm not sure what we would call, it's not just like talking about science, it's almost talking about in a spiritual sense. We call prakriti, like the Samkhya's believe there's a certain kind of nature from which everything evolves. So it doesn't arise from such incompatible causes as that, or Ishvara, like a godhead who sends down bolts of suffering to us, and so forth. Rather, in general, happiness and suffering come from virtuous and non-virtuous actions. Even the various instances of happiness and suffering arise individually without even the slightest confusion from the various instances of the 2 types of actions. So it means never like does karma get mixed up, like you did something good and something bad comes back. We might think that happens in the world, I helped them and they gave me a hard time. Is that show that karma is not exactly right? Sometimes gets confused? What do you think? Thea, what do you think? Sometimes you do a good action, you have a good motivation, you actually benefited someone, but because they're in a bad space, they bark at you. So does that show that sometimes actions and their results are not concordant?
No, not necessarily. It's
Not necessarily.
No.
Okay. So you're leaving some. Oh, okay.
No.
That is a little bit. Okay. Not at all. You should say not at all.
It depends on our own view, because if we're equanimous, we don't react. We don't have a trigger to that response.
Right, no, but I meant you did something good to somebody. You brought them a cup of tea, you said some nice words, you tried to cheer them up, and they gave you bad back. Bad-mouthed you. Is it, yeah, that's okay. But no, what I'm saying, is that an example of suffering coming back, some negative consequence coming back from virtuous action? Does that show that karma and its results?
No.
Good. Not necessarily. No. Why? Because what are you experiencing? You're experiencing the result of previous karma. What you do right now, we often think what we get back is the direct result of what we do now, but it's not the case. What we do now is at most a cooperative condition. It has two functions. It's a cooperative condition for karma to ripen, providing some condition for others' karma to ripen, for their negative mind to rise or their positive mind to rise. But it also creates karma for the future. So what we do now, of course, there's more chance of experiencing pleasure by being kind and so forth right now, right? When you're kind and honest and helpful and so forth, generally people give you better time, right? What are the Australians? Who's Australian or New Zealand? Some New Zealand? What do they say? Good value. They're good value, mate. Do you know what that means? That means that someone works hard and they give you good. I guess you get good result for your buck or whatever you're saying. Good bang for the buck. So when we experience negative things, we might think it makes no sense. I'm doing all these kind things for people. I'm doing all sorts of virtuous karma, and all of this garbage is coming back. So we might lose faith in karma, but that's because we haven't yet understood deeply. The actual results that we experience are due to karmic seeds that we've laid in previous times, usually previous lives. It's not totally common in general for karma that we create this lifetime to ripen this lifetime, right? Are there experiences? Are there occasions? What kind of occasions are there when karma of this life can ripen this lifetime? They ripen after this lifetime. Before, definitely you will be reborn. Is it according to the general Hinayana tenets? They're called the actions of immediate retribution. One good way of translating it, the actions of immediate retribution. That means without any interstice, without any interval, upon dying, go to hell, go to jail, directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Or was it $50? What is it? $200. So those are the crimes, those are the actions like that. So that doesn't ripen this lifetime. That ripens in the next lifetime. What are actions that can... Yeah?
I think, I might be wrong, the actions involving one's guru in this life?
They could ripen this lifetime. That's how Tantra is possible, I think. What else?
And your parents in this life?
Very, very heavy objects of karma, like your parents. So it's said that karma that you created with your parents when you're a youth, that can ripen when you're older. So Miles, be careful. Now's the time. Take care of mom and dad. Right? Because mother and father are very heavy objects of karma next to the Buddhas and the preceptors and the gurus and the bodhisattvas and so forth. And other actions that we create this lifetime can ripen this lifetime, but not immediately upon doing them. Usually the actions that we do may please the guru and bring about conditions for blessings and so forth, but the karmic results of them will come usually at some time later. So, from the various instances, hence gaining certainty regarding the definiteness or infallibility of actions. So the first thing karma is definite is what brings about the understanding that causes and their results are infallible. When we talk about karma, have you seen that in Lama Chopa? Please grant me blessings to realize that causes and their results are infallible. That means definite. Virtuous actions definitely give rise to happiness. Non-virtuous actions definitely give rise to suffering. This is their results. This is known as the correct view of all Buddhists, and is praised as the foundation of all wholesome qualities. I don't know if all Buddhists has to be in the quotation marks. Correct view. Usually when we talk about correct view, what's the usual meaning of correct view? The correct view of what? Emptiness, generally, right? So when we talk about, in Buddhism, when we talk about worldly correct view is that about the definite nature of karma. This is, we might think worldly correct view is if you work hard, you get a good job, you get married. Who's that? Do you know the song I'm thinking of? Get a job. Na, na, na. There's some Cat Stevens. Huh? Okay, that might be thought to be worldly correct view. That's not what Buddhists believe is the correct view of all Buddhists. All Buddhists say that correct view, that means on all levels, is this infallibility of actions and the results. So when feelings are divided, there are three kinds of feelings. We said before, pleasant feelings, dewa in Tibetan, suffering feelings, dugnal, which is dukkha, the Sanskrit word dukkha, and neutral feelings, tangyom. Tangyom also means equanimity when we talk about, and there's also a mental factor called tangyom, which is of the virtuous mental factors, which is the non-application of antidotes when you don't need to. So on page 18 it says, furthermore, as has been said in a discussion of the five aggregates, this is the text by Vasubandhu. What is feeling? Kind of rhetorical, or is it a rhetorical? It's not a rhetorical question. When you give you a question that you ask and you're giving the answer yourself, what would that be called? That's not a rhetorical. A rhetorical question is a little bit different, right? I don't know if there's a name for this. See? So there is the answer. What is feeling? It is the three types of experience. So feeling is experience of pleasure, suffering, or equal feeling. Equal feelings are more difficult to notice. Pleasant feeling is that which, when it ceases, you wish to meet with it again. Suffering is that which, when it arises, you wish to be separated from it. And that which is neither pleasant nor suffering, that is equal feeling, equanimity, is that which, when it arises, neither of the two wishes occurs. So when these three types of feelings are differentiated in terms of supports of body and mind, there are 6 types. So now we're getting into some interesting divisions here. You can talk about bodily feelings or physical feelings and mental feelings. The physical feelings, though, doesn't mean only of the body, oh, that hurts. Actually, if you hear something that is an unpleasant sound, I don't mean just like you're a jerk. That's not an unpleasant, that causes displeasure to your mind. It could be said very sweetly, right? You are a jerk. Could be said with a smile. The sound itself is not an unpleasant feeling of ear consciousness. It can cause displeasure to the mental consciousness. Right? Here, my mom used to laugh. We'll talk about this after the break. I think Elaine needs a little break. Let's take a little break.
Yeah.
So those of you who are watching the video, you notice this cookie, so you know this is after the break. Right? Okay. So when the three types of feeling are differentiated in terms of supports of body and mind, there are 6 types. So there are 3 feelings of body, that is bodily feelings of pleasure, suffering, and neutrality, and 3 mental feelings. Mental pleasure. What do we call mental pleasure? What's a name for that? Happiness, usually, right? Yi-day. We could say, you could say mental pleasure, but we usually say happy, right? Happiness. And mental unhappiness and neutral mental feelings. Now, you might say, well, what about the feeling in eye consciousness and ear consciousness and so forth? All of the consciousnesses have feeling as one of their retinue mental factors, right? Like, say, tongue consciousness. Can you experience pleasurable feeling, pleasurable sensation of your tongue consciousness? All day long, did you say?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I said all day long.
Very lucky woman.
There are some other feelings that might have been more. The tactile sensation is the most obvious, right? Tactile pleasure. We say, oh, that feels good. Like, say, sensual bliss, the bliss of sexual feeling. When Thea gives you a massage, or when you go into a nice warm bath, you have feeling in the body consciousness. That's not only thing that's meant here by bodily pleasant feeling. It also refers to the other, the eye feelings, the feelings that are concomitant in your eye consciousness, in the ear consciousness, the nose consciousness, the tongue consciousness, and the body consciousness. See, the body is obvious. Tongue consciousness, remember we talked about this last semester, that's also pretty obvious, right? How about nose consciousness? Can you differentiate pleasant odors?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty clear, right? What about sounds? What's an example of a unpleasant, I don't mean unpleasant sound, but an unpleasant feeling in the ear consciousness?
Someone screams in your ear.
Maybe that is, maybe nails on the blackboard or some discordant sound.
But there'd be a feeling.
2 leaf blowers going at the same time. That might be disturbing your mental consciousness more. Okay, something to think about. It becomes more subtle there as you go from the usually when we talk about the order of the senses, we talk about eye, ear, nose, taste, tactile. If you're going from reverse order, tactile's grossest, tongue is a little less gross, a little more subtle. Nose consciousness is, we do notice it, but it's obviously in our previous, in the existences of the animal realm, it's much more important. But the ear consciousness, we don't notice so much the feeling within it. How about the eye consciousness?
But the ear, like when you have just too loud, it's just painful.
Yeah, but that may be, I'm not sure that's actually ear consciousness. It might be. Might be tactile consciousness. Might be ear consciousness. Miles, what do you think?
But not if it's a vibration.
Earache, here's an example. Earache definitely is physical. That's tactile.
Yeah.
That's like in the body conscious. Like, say if you had a boil here, it doesn't matter if you have it in your ear or here. That's still in your body consciousness. But okay, something to think about. But eye consciousness, how about that? What is a pleasure, a pleasant feeling in the eye consciousness?
Seeing someone you haven't seen for a long
The amount of light.
Yeah, seeing Richard Gere.
No.
It's so good. Not for guys, I don't know. Maybe in San Francisco, it's okay. What do you think?
What about like the right amount of light when you're looking at something?
It doesn't mean like you see something that you find attractive. Is that generate a pleasant feeling in the eye consciousness?
Isn't that mental?
Okay, you have to differentiate. There may be, let's say, unpleasant feeling might be more clear, that some sort of bright light, or seeing some modern art or something like that might cause some discordancy in your eye. I'm joking, in your eye consciousness. But most of what we experience with the eye and the ear that we think of as pleasure or unpleasant feeling within those consciousnesses are mental. So you have to be, here, this is something you can spend some time during the week seeing if you can notice. Obviously, tactile is easy. Tongue is pretty easy. Nose consciousness is very easy also, but when you get to the ear and eye consciousnesses, it's a little more subtle what the feelings are within them. So all of those are included in body pleasant feelings or body suffering and so forth. Yeah.
Would it still be tactile then if I put eye drops in my eyes? That would be a tactile pleasure?
If you felt like say you feel some nice soothing effect, I think that's probably like Miles's question, like an earache. I think that's still tactile. It's not in your eye consciousness. Because you could do it in a dark room and you'd still feel that pleasure, right?
What about seeing like a picture of a deity? Would that be a mental consciousness or could it be a pleasant eye consciousness?
The picture of a deity is not a mental consciousness. Seeing of the picture of a mental consciousness is not a mental consciousness. It's an eye consciousness.
So that would be a pleasure then? Would that be a pleasure if you...
Seeing the picture of a deity is not necessarily pleasure. What is pleasure? It is a feeling. It's a mental factor. It can be within the retinue of the eye consciousness. So this is good. This is really good to try to get down and understand things. Well, that feeling can arise within the eye consciousness, but also whatever consciousness we have of the five senses, the eye, ear, nose, taste, and tactile, that's observed by the mental consciousness, and we always have some reaction, thinking, judgment, wow, that's nice. I wish I had that. Whoa, or reminding you of something, some boyfriend or girlfriend you had when you were Miles's age or something, or, there are different kinds of pleasure or unpleasant feelings that can arise in the mental consciousness, or sort of a sense of the sublimity of the Beethoven symphony, or the mental pleasure that arises from listening to classical music or art or playing chess or solving some problem, mathematician or something like that. But so there's pleasure in the mental consciousness. Here, as is always said in Buddhism, the principle, the most important pleasure, that which is long-lasting and can be increased infinitely, is the mental pleasure. And that's what in general, someone who is more spiritual, not just cultured, but spiritual, depends more on that mental consciousness, on the mental pleasure. Let's continue a little bit more. It says, what's the difference between bodily and mental feelings? Feelings of, literally it says body, physical, lu, and mental feelings. Feelings that arise in the retinue of the five sense consciousnesses are called bodily feelings. So it includes all of them, all the feelings that arise in the five gross senses. Feelings that arise in the retinue of the mental consciousness are called mental feelings. So she writes here, qualm. This is kind of like from Jeffrey Hopkins. It doesn't say qualm in the text. It just says, well then, what's the reason for calling the feeling that arises in the retinue of eye consciousness a body feeling, a bodily feeling? So she puts, to try to explain that, she says, even though the eye and the body are not the same. Is the eye not the same? I don't know if that's written. It's very, you say the eye consciousness and the body consciousness are not the same. Is the eye not part of the body? Yeah. But the point is, usually we talk about tactile body consciousness, meaning tactile consciousness. So here's a famous quotation from a text by Aryadeva, one of the main disciple of Nagarjuna, called the 400 stanzas of the yogic activities of bodhisattvas. They're usually called the 400. I mentioned this stanza before. Just as the body's sense power, she says, pervades the body, likewise ignorance abides in all. So you can find this if you get the text later on our Tibetan text. It's on the backside of page 8b, one line from the bottom, this quotation. Lula luang jishindu timug kunla negirte. It's a very famous quotation, comes in many times, because what this is saying is the body's sense power the tactile sense power, just like in regard to Niles' question and Oma's question about the earache or the eye drops, the tactile consciousness pervades even the other organs, the faculties. It pervades the eye. If you stick a needle in your eye, it's not your eye consciousness that's feeling the pain, it's the tactile consciousness, right? You follow me? If you stick a needle in your tongue, or if you have your tongue pierced, that's not your tongue conscious. Of course, you may, I don't know, I haven't done it, but I imagine you can feel metallic taste. But I'm not talking about that. Just the pain is the tactile consciousness. The tactile organ pervades all the body, including the other organs. So the tactile consciousness exists in all those places. I think there's a couple of places it doesn't exist, right? Where doesn't it exist tactile consciousness? The hairs, fingernails,
That's not true.
tips of fingernails.
But hair definitely very sensitive.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not.
So when if you have long hair and someone clips your hair, you so
Just stepped on your hair and you weren't moving, you wouldn't feel it.
look how surprised she looks. She's really thinking about it. You think if someone cuts your hair? Okay, we'll do an experiment. Someone afterwards will take a scissor and cut and see if they feel that.
The hair being cut. Not pulling on the follow.
So the consciousness doesn't pervade there, and certainly the sense consciousness. I think also some people, a lot of the brain. Maybe that's what the ancient texts don't mention that. But people who do brain operations say they can. I mean, people can experience. You put a needle in the brain, and they might have some kind of I taste chocolate, or there's who's cooking liver and onions or something. But there's not pain. The tactile does anyone know? Is anyone? Pardon? So that. Okay, but the brain itself. So that's from your own experience. So where's Dan? Is that Dan? Have you experienced that too? So sometimes when they do brain operations, they can give some anesthetic for the taking off of the crown or whatever, but they don't have to do that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I might have just not gotten it. You might have already described this, but I'm kind of confused. Could you give an example of a feeling of eye consciousness that's not tactile?
So this is what I was asking you to investigate. It may be, for instance, unpleasant feeling of eye consciousness. Some of it's, like say, glaring light. Part of it may be tactile, but part of it is within the eye consciousness itself. It's too bright. Because the tactile consciousness, if you shine the light on your arm, it's not going to, the tactile consciousness there, it may be that it has a certain element within the eye organ, but some of it may be eye consciousness. Yeah.
But are you always using your mind to interpret what you see, what you feel, what you hear? So it seems to me that there's always an aspect of the mental.
Yes.
Even in, what you feel.
Yes, but we can still differentiate the two. Like the example I said before, the Buddha, when he was sick, taking the aspect of being sick, they asked him, how do you feel? He said, there are waves of pain coursing through my body, but my mind is at ease. Sometimes when we're in a good space, occasionally or rarely, something which might otherwise disturb other people or ourselves can take place, and we can go, oh, well, kids. Miles just poured ink on our Persian carpet or something. Oh, it had to be washed anyway. But at other times, our mental consciousness can interpret that with great anguish. There's an interface there, but they can be differentiated. Holy beings, like the Arhat that we were talking about before, there might be suffering arising in their body or in one of their sense consciousnesses, but their mind doesn't have to react to that because they've realized emptiness, selflessness. So the more that we can overcome attachment, first we have to apply some temporary antidotes, temporal antidotes. Understanding impermanence. Oh, this will pass. I can get the money back again. I have a perfect human rebirth. Rather than, oh, my money's been stolen. Actually, that doesn't even affect your body at all, does it? Your money's been stolen, or someone's called you a jerk. Yeah, well, not directly when your money's stolen. It's not like suddenly, oh, my money's stolen. Suddenly something hurts in your body. It's the mental, completely mental reaction. If you get stung by a bee, sometimes you can be very upset by that. And that exacerbates, that makes the situation even worse. If you can keep calm, then at least the body can heal, and you won't have that kind of mental anguish on top of it. So this is something that we have to investigate. So this quotation from Aryadeva is implying this. Just as the body sense faculty pervades the body everywhere the other faculties are present, in the same way, the mental factor, the delusion of ignorance, is present in all activities, ordinary activities. Whenever we have, even whether we create negative karma or contaminated virtue, even the virtuous karma we have now, there is always present grasping to true existence, that ignorance. That's kind of the fundamental kind of ignorance. When we talk about the mental factors, the klesha, avidya, ignorance, marikpa, like Dorje Marikpa, the name of our erstwhile name. I mean, it's completely labeled. The fact that it is completely appropriate is irrelevant. So in the same way, so this was the origin of some discussion we had before. Ignorance pervades all of the delusions. So there's some discussion in Lama Tsongkhapa's text and in other texts. Well, wait a second, because ignorance has a particular way of apprehending the object, perceives the object as truly existent, grasps that it is truly existent. Whereas attachment doesn't have that aspect. It grasps at an object as what?
Pleasant.
Attractive. Pleasant, maybe you could say pleasant, but depends on what you mean. We're using pleasant to refer to a feeling. So we say attractive, yionwa, captivating, you know. And as a reason, and what are we captivated by? In general, we're captivated by something that causes pleasure to arise. Something we call things attractive. We might use different adjectives. We use attractive for usual visual things, but what would you say for fragrances? It's an attractive fragrance? What would you say? If it's a nice, pleasant, okay, pleasant fragrance, okay. That means it generates pleasure. So the things that we call attractive are called that, or pleasant, are because they give rise to feeling. By that condition, our karma ripens. Other people can smell that and don't have the same karma, right? Like, I don't know if you ever know, if you've ever seen dogs eating excrement. Have you ever seen? Big smile on their face. You know, they love that smell and everything. For us, the karma is different, right? It's not as though. Do anyone not know that? No? Do you not know that? You never saw dogs? Yeah. They like sometimes, not all dogs. So maybe not all extra either. So this famous quotation: just as the body sense power with respect to the body, likewise ignorance is present in all. That means it is present, abides in all, during all activities. Even our virtuous karma, ignorance is present. But Arya beings, they create uncontaminated virtue because they have the ignorance has either been diminished or eliminated completely, so they can create virtue without the presence of that ignorance. Okay. Just as it has been said, as has been said above, the body's sense power pervades one's entire body, from the crown down to the soles of the feet. Thus, any feeling arising in the retinue of the other four sense consciousnesses, such as the eye consciousness, is also called a bodily feeling, physical feeling. So it's not as though the taste, the pleasurable feeling in the taste consciousness is a tactile consciousness. It's just called body because it's part of the It is pervaded by the physical sense power also, and is susceptible to having that kind of feeling. Also, when these 6 feelings are differentiated into 2, here's another way of dividing into it. We say zangzing, here it translates materialistic feelings and non-materialistic feelings. Zangzing.
That's materialistic.
Well, this one way of translating it. Sometimes this word comes, actually is a Tibetan, sometimes people, zangi, zingi, means kind of messed up. So sometimes they say confused, but it doesn't mean that. Amisha is a Sanskrit word, and means unripened. Amisha sometimes means flesh. So sometimes I think Konzit translated as fleshy feelings, sort of like sensual feelings. But what it means is, and sometimes it comes up when we talk about giving. When we talk about 2 kinds of giving, we can say giving of dharma, chugi jimba, and zangzengi jimba, giving of material. So that's why she's translated as materialistic. But it doesn't always mean materialistic. What it means comes in the next thing. What do materialistic and non-materialistic mean? What does zangzing and zangzing mepa mean? Feelings that are concomitant with, that bear similarities with the craving for the contaminated, appropriated aggregates are called this fleshy or turbulent. Another way some people translate turbulent feelings. And the other one, the zangzen mepa, people translate it as disinterested. Konza translates it as disinterested. It's the same, it's just like with a negative particle in the beginning. So you'd have to be compelled to say non-materialistic, non-materialistic, turbulent, non-turbulent, fleshy, non-fleshy. But what it means is feelings that bear similarity with the exalted wisdom directly realizing selflessness are called non-turbulent, non-material, non-fleshy feelings. So there's not many of those. It's only, say, in the continuum of an ordinary being, other than a Buddha, say beings that are other than Buddhas, even Arya beings, the exalted wisdom that directly realizes selflessness only takes place in meditation, right? So only at that time, when you're directly realizing emptiness, the feeling that arises is going to be one in which maybe you could say disinterested. You're not, there's no zangzing, there's no confusion in your mind. So when we studied with Kirti Senchab Rinpoche about Tantra, in the various stages of Tantra, one of the things that one tries to do is to generate a blissful consciousness concomitant with what? As always, concomitant with emptiness. The wisdom that realizes emptiness. Yeah. You weren't in our earlier class. It was one of the examination questions. Do you remember? I was really going to come down if anyone got that one wrong. I said, emptiness is, and then one of the answers was very precious. If anyone put that down, I was going to say, no, emptiness, everything has emptiness, That's the nature of everything, good and bad. What's precious is the wisdom that realizes emptiness. So what one tries to do in the higher stages is to be able to bring about enlightenment quickly, is to have this kind of zangzen mebe sorwa, this kind of non-materialistic, non-turbulent, disinterested, if you wish, kind of feeling. The blissful feeling which is concomitant with a wisdom that realizes emptiness. So you're not grasping to it. You're not kind of, no? Okay. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I was just...
Okay. So, well then. So this kind of, when text says well then, this kind of means there's some kind of doubt that's coming up.
All the materialistic ones would be sort of pervaded with ignorance.
They're all pervaded. How does it say? What does it say? Feelings that are concomitant with the craving for the contaminated, appropriated aggregates. What are the contaminated, appropriated aggregates? Do you know, Dan? Have you studied them? Who knows? Chris, you must know. Contaminated, appropriated aggregates. Some people don't like this this kind of translation. I think that's quite good. Contaminated, you remember what we talked about, phenomena that are contaminated? Or in our other class, we talked about contaminated phenomena. It doesn't mean contaminated by nuclear radiation or something like that. It means contaminated phenomena. And the Abhidharma says all phenomena are either contaminated or uncontaminated. So contaminated phenomena, the only things the Abhidharma accepts as uncontaminated are the path and cessation, the truth of the path and the truth of cessation. So uncontaminated means that which when you perceive it, or when it's present in your mind, does not give rise to contaminations in your mind, to other delusions. So true cessation and the path that realizes emptiness, they are not contaminated. The Buddha's body aggregate, according to the Vaibhashikas, remember, is contaminated. So even you look at the Buddha's body, you may generate attachment or revulsion, according to the Vaibhashikas. According to the Mahayana, that's not the case. If you generate attachment or delusion looking at the Nirmanakaya, you're not actually seeing the Nirmanakaya, you're seeing your own karmic appearance of that. So the contaminated aggregates, first of all, are aggregates which are thrown because of karma. We call these contaminated aggregates because they're thrown. First of all, they're the result of our contaminated karma of the past. Karma that was created out of delusions, right? These are called contaminated aggregates, where our aggregates are not like the aggregate body of a Arya Bodhisattva or a Buddha that is not arisen out of contaminated karma. Appropriated means different things. Nirlen, Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to call closely taken. Nirpa means to approach or to get too close. Lempa means taken. So appropriated. Appropriated aggregates means when our consciousness was in one meaning, when we're in the bardo, our consciousness is in the bardo, we appropriate these bodily aggregates, this body aggregate, the fertilized egg, by entering into it. So that's one kind of meaning of that. So the contaminated, appropriated aggregates, that means our 5 aggregates. What are the 5 aggregates? Do you know, Steve? 5 aggregates? Is it a rock and roll group?
Appearance, concept.
No, I don't know.
I can't remember the other 3.
No, I don't. Unless you're translating them in another way. What's your? I forgot your name. Gordon.
Form.
The form aggregate, which includes all of the matter of our body.
Feeling.
Feeling aggregate, which is all of the feeling, just exactly this mental factor. The feeling aggregate is the mental factor feeling, including all the pleasurable, unpleasurable, neutral, of all of the 6 consciousnesses.
Perception.
Or discrimination, which is the next mental factor we'll talk about. It also is a mental factor.
4th one I can't recall. 5th one. Consciousness,
which is primary, all the primary consciousness of our 6 consciousnesses. This one is called what? Compositional factors. So this is all the rest, for the most part, all the rest of the mental factors. So we are comprised of body aggregate, all the various atoms and molecules of our body, and then you can say body and mind. All of this is mind. So here, this one is primary consciousness. These 3 you could put as one and just say all the mental factors. But these 2 are centered out for some reason, feeling and discrimination. All the rest of the mental factors are found in compositional factors. Remember we talked before why feeling and discrimination are...
Source. They cause the other.
In some way. They're different in the sutras, in the Hinayana tradition especially. There are many kinds of explanations. Why did Buddha divide it up this way? Why did he put out feeling and discrimination separate and all the rest of the mental factors here? And Lama Tsongkhapa mentions that he found the explanation that Vasubandhu relates in the Abhidharma Kosha to be very sort of most sensible. It's not just Vasubandhu's idea, but what was prevalent in the Vaibhashika system. Those are said to be, in one kind of commentarial tradition, they're said to be separated out from the other mental factors because they're the source of samsara for ordinary beings and scholars, or pundits. So most people argue, most of the arguments that we have, all of our tumult in life revolve around trying to get feelings, right? Get rid of bad feelings, get good feelings. We want to have pleasant feelings of body, good taste, nice fragrances, so forth. We want to hear ego-pleasing words. We want to have mentally, we want to have people say, "I love you," and sometimes that's not enough. Then if we're not satisfied with that, we want to have the bodily component also. "Oh, you only want me for my mind." Or if we do have the body pleasure, we're not satisfied because, "Oh, you only want me for my body." So we want everything, right? We want to have all of those feelings. And discrimination is discriminating one tenet, one philosophical system is superior to another. This is what scholars argue about and what causes them out of their ignorance to revolve within cyclic existence. So this is one explanation. We'll talk about that again later, but why those two are set it up. But the feeling aggregate is all of this mental factor feeling. It's not some other kind of thing. It's not like all the feelings of joy, love. Love is not in the feeling aggregate, right? Sometimes people say, "Oh, that's a feeling. I have feelings of love." That's not what we mean by feeling. Feeling is just sensation. Okay. Also, when the 6 feelings are differentiated into 2, we had materialistic and non-materialistic, or however you like to translate it, turbulent and disinterested. Well then, if one were to explain the above-mentioned non-materialistic suffering feeling, this is the question comes. How can a suffering feeling be present in those who possess the exalted wisdom directly realizing selflessness? Remember, we talked about this a little before. If you have a deep, special kind of wisdom that directly realizes selflessness, how can you have suffering feeling in the continuum? And it says there are many such cases. This is not talking about at that time, but just in the continuum of one who possesses that wisdom. That means whether it's manifest or not, they have that wisdom. They've realized emptiness. An Arya being. There are many such cases. For example, the scripture on discipline, the Vinaya Agama, says that even foe destroyers, arhats, who have abandoned the conception of a self, they've abandoned it, right? Arhats. They have no self-grasping whatsoever. They experience suffering feelings such as headaches due to the fruition of past actions. So remember the example I gave of the Buddha. Although the Buddha is said not to have actually been experiencing suffering, he was manifesting as the arhats might. That he said, there's waves of pain coursing through my body, but my mind is at ease. So furthermore, another way of dividing up feelings is by way of their supports or their bases. When we talk about the basis for the visual feeling, the basis of that is going to be the eye organ in a certain sense. Here it says, feeling arising from contact upon aggregation. And Siggy has put in some phrases that's not in the text. She says, of a visible form, eye sense power, and eye consciousness. Actually, the only thing that the text says is aggregation, feeling arising from contact upon aggregation of the eye. So that implies that aggregation here means that for an I consciousness to arise, there have to be three things present, first of all, right? There has to be the organ. Remember we talked about this before? There has to be the organ. What else? An object. In this case, it might be an image on the retina. The organ would be like, say, the rods and cones in the back of the retina. There has to be an image on that. And there has to be what? Of I consciousness present there. Otherwise, you could say that there would be feeling in the I consciousness of a corpse, in which the consciousness is gone. There has to be, those three things have to aggregate together. The coming together of those three things is what's called the mental factor contact. That's one of the omnipresent mental factors, contact. That comes a little bit later. So contact always precedes feeling. So that's kind of the implication of this feeling arising from contact, the mental factor contact, which is the aggregation of the various organs, the various consciousnesses. So in the ear consciousness, it would be ear feeling, or let's say use the one that you can recognize where you say tongue feeling, or what we say gustatory feeling, because it's not a feeling of the tongue, it's a feeling of the tongue consciousness, right? Tongue consciousness feeling arises from the contact, which is the aggregation, the coming together of these three things, the mental factor which is the coming together of those things, three things, the tongue consciousness, the object of taste, and what is it? Preceding moment. Well, I said tongue consciousness.
The tongue.
The tongue organ, the tongue consciousness, preceding moment of consciousness, and the object, sweet, chocolate, or whatever it is. Or I used to have these. I remember we used to have these when I was a kid. The windmill cookies. Before I put that on my tongue consciousness, there probably was a neutral feeling of tongue consciousness, because it was an aggregation of something that didn't give a particular flavor, but wow, no. There's some particular feeling arising because of that aggregation. Okay, so there's all of these six. We don't have to elaborate. Further, these six are each divided into three: pleasant, suffering, and neutral. So in other words, there's six kinds of feelings. Feelings arisen in the I consciousness because of aggregation of the three things. Feeling arisen in the ear consciousness and so forth. There's six kinds of feelings. And then each are divided into three: pleasant, suffering, or neutral. So you have 18 kinds of feelings. So I like that this is my kind of guy here, says, fearing wordiness. If I were to describe in detail their individual identities, I will leave them out. Like going in, I mean, it's only different sutras, sometimes the Buddha elaborated all of the different things, In the shorter versions of those sutras, there only just one thing is mentioned, and then you can kind of understand all the rest by example, right? So it's sometimes, there are three famous sutras of the perfection of wisdom: the small, middling, and the large perfection of wisdom. They all supposedly refer to the same incident. The Buddha was teaching on Vulture's Peak, not the Heart Sutra, another incident when he talked about emptiness, and various episodes took place. And different disciples remembered it differently. And some of them, when they recited it later, they remembered it in a very brief, they call the 8,000 verse perfection of wisdom. Have you heard of that? It's in one volume. Geitongba, we say, 8,000 verse. Then some remembered it a little more elaborate, 25,000 verse. It was about 3 times as big, 3 volumes. Then others remembered it in much more elaborate, the 100,000 verse. We call it Boom, the 100,000 verse perfection of wisdom sutra, all talking about the same thing. So you might think, well, which of those, were they smarter? Did the smarter people know the detailed one? Remember the detailed one?
It depends on the mental.
Depends on different things. Sometimes, His Holiness has said sometimes there were two great scholars of the same period. It was Kuntang, and I can't remember, two of the great scholars that often are referred to quotations. Maybe Jamyang Shepa was one, and I can't remember who the other was. One of them always, whatever explanation of a text he gave, it was always like incredibly extensive. The other one always gave very, very concise. But both of them had all the information. So here, what Geshe Gelsen is saying, fearing wordiness, he's not going to do the long way. He's just giving you, even he mentioned all 6. That was enough. Okay. Moreover, when feelings are divided by way of object of abandonment and antidote, there are 2. So what does that mean, object of abandonment and antidote? Anyone have an idea? Marsh, do you know? Objects of abandonment? Kids on the street? Objects of abandonment are those things to be abandoned by the path, that which we have to give up. So the delusions, the seeds of the delusions, the imprints, those are called objects of abandonment, right? And the antidotes are, or the remedies, are those things that give rise to the abandonment of those objects of abandonment, right? So it says, when feelings are divided by way of this, in this context, because sometimes in the scriptures you'll find this mentioned, there are feelings that support longing, or she translates adherence, shenpa tempe sorwa, and feelings that support deliverance, gompar jungwa. Deliverance, I'm not sure. Okay. Gompar jungwa tempe sorwa. So what does this mean? Because you'll have the same qualm. He says, feelings that support adherence or longing are feelings that are concomitant with the craving for the attributes of the desire realm. Actually, it just says, doesn't say realm in the text. It says duyun, means the desirable objects, which are the attributes of the desire realm. But this is just usual that the desirable qualities in the desire realm are which give rise to attachment. Like someone who has developed shine or shamatha, right, tranquil abiding, their mind is elevated from our mind, is said to be separated from attachment to the desire realm. So even you put beautiful flower or windmill cookie, I mean, it's hard to believe that. You put that before them, no attachment arises. Of course, that is also present, that kind of separation from attachment is also present in Arya beings who've eliminated attachment by the antidote. But even simply developing tranquil abiding, even before you become an Arya, even you have very deep concentration, you become less and less interested in the ordinary desire attributes of the world. Right? You know that, right? This is a good reason for developing tranquil abiding. So it says, feelings that support deliverance are, for example, feelings that are concomitant or bear similarities with a mental consciousness that, having turned away from attachment to the attributes of the desire realm, is included within the actual first concentration. So what that means is when you develop a tranquil abiding, shamatha, your mind is elevated for that period of time while you're in that concentration, in the actual first absorption. It's called the first, in Pali they call it jhana. We say dhyana in Sanskrit. The first concentration, not dhyana, dhyana, which is the origin of the supposedly the Chinese word Chan Buddhism, and Zen, right? Supposedly, maybe there was a word in their language that sounded like Dhyan also, which had a similar meaning, so they called it that, Chan and so forth. But these kinds of feelings, so ordinary feelings within our consciousness now, as our mind is fully enmeshed in the desire realm, are called what? Feelings that support longing or adherence, which support adherence, and feelings that support deliverance or umbar jungwa are feelings within the continuum, mental continuum, let's say, of an individual who's developed that kind of tranquil abiding. Does that make sense? I'm hearing one. Okay. So finally it says, such a twofold division of feelings is taught in order to make known the manner in which craving is induced through the force of feeling, and the manner in which one can become free of attachment to feeling in dependence on an actual concentration. Actual concentration means this. When you develop the concentrations, the jhanas, or the dhyanas, we say samten. Do we know someone named Samten? Is there someone at the house named Samten? It's a typical Tibetan name, right? That's the word dhyan in dhyana in can mean meditation or concentration. When you develop shine, you can approach that. When you actually have actual shine, that's called the access or preparation to the first concentration. That's not the actual first concentration yet. The word actual here has a particular meaning. It means not just the preparation or the access to that, which is shine, but actually then using lakton, which is what? What's the Sanskrit word? Vipassana. To separate yourself from attachment to the desire realm, looking at the defects of the desire realm and the attributes of the first concentration with that deep kind of penetrative insight, and separating, your mind actually separates, in a sense, it separates from attachment. The attachment is left behind. There's still a seed of attachment in your mind. You haven't abandoned attachment, actually, with actual antidote. But just temporarily your mind is free of attachment by attaining that actual first concentration. So finally it says, therefore, if you wish to understand these modes precisely, you should carefully consult the upper and lower abhidharmas. Again, Shizuzi. Ngompa gong ok. Gongpa means upper, okma means lower. So that means the Abhidharma written by Asanga, the Abhidharma Samuccaya, and the Abhidharma Kosha written by Vasubandhu. Also, one should learn from the stages of the path to enlightenment, the text by Lama Tsongkhapa, how not to let the three, pleasant, suffering, and neutral feelings, become causes of the three poisons. What are the three poisons? Attachment arises from what? Suffering feelings, right? Attachment gets right from pleasant feelings. Yeah. Aversion and anger arise from unpleasant feelings. And bewilderment or ignorance in general is continued by neutral feelings. So you can see in the Lan Rim about that. We'll talk a little bit about that more next time also. In general, you might notice this week, besides trying to notice the feelings in your eye and ear consciousness, see if you notice during the week when you experience something that's pleasurable, whether some attachment arises in your mind. Does attachment arise in the sense consciousness? Say, for instance, you taste, these nice oatmeal cookies. Not oatmeal, was it? Windmill cookies. When it's on your tongue consciousness, does attachment arise in George's tongue consciousness? Because of that pleasure? It arises in the mental consciousness. So here's another thing, like the interface between, you were asking before about the interface between the two. Both can be functioning. The tongue consciousness is apprehending some pleasant feeling, is experiencing, let's say. It is the experience. Feeling is the experience of pleasure in that case. The mental consciousness is aware of that and can develop attachment. You start looking around, like, how can I get the rest of them, Notice if you, yeah.
What is it? Like if you see or you think about a cookie and then this craving arises,
You had the same? Just teasing you.
Is that, you know, the tongue, the sensation on the tongue, if you look at a cookie or something like that, is that mental consciousness or tongue consciousness?
Well, it could only, it itself is not, it itself would be a mental factor if it's a feeling, right? You're talking about the feeling or the attachment?
The craving.
The craving is like a delusion, right? A mental factor, other than feeling. So that has to be present in one of the 6 consciousnesses. Is craving present in the tongue consciousness? That's what I was asking you for. What do you think, Francois? Is attachment, is it the tongue consciousness that wants to get more? No, it's the mental consciousness. Attachment only takes place in the mental consciousness.
There's a sensation on the tongue.
Yeah, but
there's
always an it's not possible that the tongue consciousness could be functioning and actually experiencing something without the mental consciousness apprehending that. So it's the mental consciousness that makes the decision, so, oh, that was nice, I want to get more of those, How much does that cost,
So there's not a physical sensation craving then? There is a physical,
there's a physical feeling, you mean, in the tongue consciousness?
There's a feeling.
There is a feeling, there is the feeling pleasure, that's what we're saying. There's a difference between craving and feeling. Which causes which? The craving causes the feeling?
I think in that instance it does.
The feeling causes the craving, or the memory of the feeling, or the anticipation. Maybe you never experienced it, but you think, oh, Richard Gere. You never, but you might have some analogy and you think, wow, that would be nice. So you develop some craving. Miles, you had a question, I'm sorry.
I think I got answered.
Richard Gere.
I was going to say that when you crave something, it's almost like you can taste it, or like you can touch it, or...
I think, because of, it's interesting, if you notice yourself daydreaming or fantasizing about something, usually it's about physical pleasure, sensual pleasure, or maybe fame or success or whatever, that can generate a pleasurable feeling in your mental consciousness, or even seemingly, it can actually have a result in your body consciousness also, obviously, those of you know what I'm talking about. So they are related, but it's said that feelings give rise to, they are the condition that give rise to the delusions, to craving in this case. Also, negative, unpleasant feelings give rise to what? Craving? Certain kind of craving is called craving to be separated from. But in general, it gives rise, when you talk about the 3 poisons, unpleasant feelings give rise to aversion, which is like anger. Like Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, a very famous verse in the chapter on patience. So it's talking about the antidotes of anger, right? He says, if there's something you can do about the situation, there's no reason to be unhappy. If there's nothing you can do about the situation, there's no reason to be unhappy. So what we say, ergo, you don't have to be unhappy. Don't need unhappy mind. So what that means is, why does he talk about unhappiness when he's actually talking about anger? Because unhappiness is always the precursor of anger. If you can keep a happy mind, you'll never be angry. Does that make sense? If your mind, if you think about it, check this next week. When you get a little irritated about something, you're a little feisty, a little anger, depression arising, sort of your agitation, it will be because there's something that is being experienced by your mental consciousness as unpleasant. Displeasure.
You can be happy with attachment.
Pardon?
I mean, it has to be happy without attachment. If you're all happy and you've got attachment, somebody comes along and kicks you or something, you really get angry. So
well, could be. Remember when we talked here about the different kinds, we talked here, they called materialistic and non-materialistic feelings, or we say turbulent. That means one in which there is craving for the these aggregates, you know, or feelings that support adherence and so forth. So in other words, if you still have, whenever there is feeling in the continuum of an ordinary person, not one who has, let's say, tranquil abiding, not one who's realized emptiness, the pleasant feelings will always give rise to some kind of attachment. It just depends in that person's continuum. It may be that they're somewhat trained in either from previous lives or this lifetime, and there can be a certain amount of non-attachment to it because of training their mind. Oh, this will pass. They see the defects of that. Even though something is attractive, we do learn. Something looks attractive, but we learn to stay away from it. Moths don't know that. They see fire and they immediately go into it. So that it's said to be a sign of intelligence, isn't it, of maturity, that even though something is perceived as pleasant, gives rise to a pleasurable feeling, that we can prevent ourself grasping for it. We can overcome the craving through some kind of wisdom in our mind. This will pass. There are defects of that. Even if I had that, you know, I'd have a lot of baggage and unpleasant things and so forth. Okay? So we're going into more detail on feeling and discrimination, but as we go through the other ones, we'll go more quickly. So next time, why don't you try to read over what we've done and see if you have any questions, and also read the section on discrimination and on intention, attention, and contact, and we'll try to quickly go over the 5 omnipresent mental factors. So the first omnipresent mental factor is feeling. Okay. So let's spend a moment to dedicate the virtuous karma, the merit that we've created. So try to be able to make it forceful. Try to calm your mind, concentrate your mind, so it's not distracted by other things. Recognize what you're dedicating, that we've, in the act of listening, paying attention tonight with a positive motivation that we created at the beginning, we've created roots of virtue, strong, virtuous karmic seeds that are laid within our consciousness that will is definite. They can only give rise to, if they do mature, they can only give rise to something which is pleasurable. They can't give rise to, it's impossible. There's no basis for saying that they can arise as suffering. So this is some incredible thing that we've created. To dedicate it means to make an aspiration, which is another mental factor we'll talk about in the 5 object ascertaining mental factors. A desire, strong desire or aspiration that this ripen in a particular way, which can actually lead it in that direction. Think, due to this karma, may this become the cause of my quickly developing the bodhicitta, which is not yet developed in my and others' continua, mental continua. And due to this merit, may it become the cause of that whatever inklings, beginnings of bodhicitta that have arisen, for them not to decline, for them not to decrease, but to continue to grow more and more. And if you have some understanding of emptiness, to think of the emptiness of the 3 spheres, the emptiness of the karma itself, the karmic seeds, the emptiness of that's the object to be dedicated, the goal dedicated to, the generation of bodhicitta, empty also of being findable, empty of any true existence, and the act of dedication itself, the person dedicating, the so-called activity of dedicating, also is empty of any kind of true existence, findable from its own side. All 3 are merely imputed to exist by the mind, but they have no substantial true existence as it appears to us. Even so, within emptiness, knowing that, still cause and effect is infallible.